In a luxury mansion, a nanny is fired without a chance to say goodbye to the child she raised. The 7-year-old girl holds a crumpled drawing and learns that even affection can be discarded. In the early hours of the morning, with the nanny's photo in her hands, she asks her father, "Are you going to fire me too, Daddy?" The question leaves the man completely shocked, and what he does the next day will surprise you. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The crystal chandeliers of the Hartwell Mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, cast cold reflections across marble, floors that seemed to stretch endlessly. 7-year-old Lily Hartwell sat cross-legged on the plush carpet of her bedroom, carefully drawing a stick figure with a bright pink skirt. Her small fingers moved with determination as she added a smiling face to the figure, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. This wasn't just any drawing, it was a gift for Maggie, her nanny of 3 years, the woman who had become more of a mother to her than anyone else in her young life. "Look, Maggie, it's you!" Lily held up the paper proudly, her eyes sparkling with anticipation of Maggie's reaction. Maggie Foster knelt beside her, her warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. At 32, Maggie had spent the last 3 years caring for Lily with unwavering devotion, filling the void left by Lily's perpetually absent father and her mother, who had left when Lily was just 4 years old. "It's beautiful, sweetie," Maggie said, gently taking the drawing. "Is that a pink skirt? You remembered my favorite color." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "And look, we're holding hands right there by that tree. That's the one in Central Park, where we had ice cream last weekend." Their quiet moment was interrupted by the harsh sound of expensive Italian shoes clicking against marble. Maxwell Hartwell, Lily's father, and one of the most influential investment bankers on Wall Street, stood in the doorway. His tailored suit seemed to emphasize the rigid line of his shoulders, and his face was a cold mask of authority. "Maggie, my office. Now," he said, his voice clipped and controlled. Maggie's smile faltered, but she quickly composed herself for Lily's sake. "I'll be right back, sweetie. Why don't you add some birds to that tree while I talk with your dad?" Lily nodded, but a shadow of concern crossed her face. She had learned to read the subtle shifts in her father's demeanor, and something felt different today. Something that made her stomach twist into a tight knot. Maxwell's office was a testament to his success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens, walls adorned with expensive art he never really looked at, and a massive mahogany desk that served as the command center for his financial empire. "Close the door," he instructed, not bothering to look at Maggie as he moved behind his desk. Maggie obeyed, her heart beginning to race. She had always maintained a respectful, professional relationship with her employer, despite his cold demeanor and frequent absences. "Mr. Hartwell, is everything all right?" she asked, standing with her hands clasped in front of her. Maxwell finally looked up, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers with glacial intensity. "No, Maggie, everything is not all right. Would you care to explain why there's $50 missing from my desk drawer?" The accusation hung in the air like a physical thing. Maggie felt her breath catch in her throat, confusion, and then horror, washing over her. "Missing money? I don't understand. I've never taken anything from your desk, Mr. Hartwell," she said, her voice steady despite the panic rising within her. Maxwell's expression hardened. "Don't insult my intelligence. You're the only one who comes in here to clean when I'm away. The money was there yesterday morning. It's gone today. Patricia confirms no one else entered my office." Patricia, the house manager, had always regarded Maggie with barely concealed resentment. Maggie's relationship with Lily was something Patricia could never achieve with her strict adherence to hierarchy and rules. "Mr. Hartwell, please. I would never steal from you. I care too much about my position here, about Lily." "Don't," Maxwell cut her off sharply. "Don't use my daughter to manipulate me. I trusted you in my home with my child, and you betrayed that trust." Maggie felt tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall. "Sir, there must be some mistake. If you check the security cameras—" "I've seen enough," Maxwell interrupted again. "You're fired, effective immediately. Patricia will provide your final paycheck. minus the stolen amount. You have 30 minutes to pack your things and leave the premises." The floor seemed to shift beneath Maggie's feet. 3 years of loving care, of birthday celebrations and nighttime stories, of bandaging scraped knees and soothing nightmares, all erased by an unfounded accusation over $50. "Please," she whispered, "at least let me say goodbye to Lily." Something flickered in Maxwell's eyes, perhaps a moment of doubt or humanity, but it was quickly extinguished. "That would only make things more difficult. You will leave now without disrupting my daughter further." Upstairs, Lily had finished adding little birds to her drawing when she heard raised voices. Something inside her small chest tightened as she set down her crayon and crept to the top of the grand staircase. From her vantage point, she could see into the foyer below, where Maggie was being escorted to the door by Patricia's rigid form. Maggie's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She carried a hastily packed bag, and her shoulders were hunched as if bearing an invisible weight. Lily watched in confusion and growing alarm as Patricia opened the front door, her voice carrying up the stairwell. "Mr. Hartwell was too generous, if you ask me. If it were up to me, I'd have called the police." Maggie flinched at the words but said nothing. As she stepped outside, she looked back toward the house one last time, and for a brief moment, her eyes met Lily's at the top of the stairs. A world of unsaid goodbyes passed between them before Patricia firmly closed the door. Lily sat frozen, her small hands gripping the banister. The pink drawing lay forgotten upstairs as she tried to understand what she had just witnessed. Her father emerged from his office, straightening his tie as if he'd just concluded a routine business meeting rather than shattering 2 lives. "Daddy," Lily's small voice echoed in the vast foyer. "Where's Maggie going?" Maxwell looked up, momentarily startled to see his daughter perched at the top of the stairs. He hadn't expected to have this conversation so soon, hadn't prepared a suitable explanation. "Lily, come down here," he said, his business voice softening slightly. With trembling legs, Lily descended the staircase, each step bringing her closer to a truth she already feared. When she reached her father, she looked up at him with wide, questioning eyes. "Maggie had to leave, sweetheart. She won't be coming back," Maxwell said, placing an awkward hand on his daughter's shoulder. "But why? She didn't say goodbye." "She always says goodbye even when she just goes to the grocery store," Lily's voice quavered. Maxwell cleared his throat. "Sometimes adults have to make quick decisions. Patricia will look after you until we find a suitable replacement." Replacement? The word felt foreign and wrong on Lily's tongue. How could anyone replace Maggie? "Yes, now why don't you go back to your room? I have an important conference call in 5 minutes, Maxwell said, already reaching for his phone. Lily stood rooted to the spot, unable to process the casual dismissal of someone so central to her world. In that moment, she learned a devastating lesson. In her father's universe, people could vanish in an instant. Affection could be rescinded without warning, and nothing, not even love, was truly secure. As her father retreated into his office, Lily climbed the stairs alone, returning to her bedroom where the pink-skirted stick figure smiled up from the paper, now a painful reminder of what had been so abruptly taken away. She picked up the drawing with trembling hands, carefully folding it and tucking it into her special box of treasures. That night, as Patricia awkwardly attempted to follow Maggie's bedtime routine, Lily lay rigid beneath her princess-themed comforter, her mind replaying the image of Maggie walking away without a backward glance. She didn't understand what had happened, but she knew enough to recognize that her world had been irreparably altered. And in his study below, surrounded by financial statements and acquisition reports, Maxwell Hartwell refused to acknowledge the hollow feeling in his chest, the nagging doubt that perhaps in his rush to judgment, he had made a terrible mistake, one that would cost far more than $50. The next morning arrived with a cruel brightness that seemed to mock Lily's confusion and sadness. Patricia had laid out her school uniform with mechanical efficiency, lacking the little touches Maggie always added. The favorite hair clip positioned just so, the lucky bracelet placed beside her socks, the note with a smiley face that would find its way into her lunchbox. "Time to get dressed, Miss Hartwell," Patricia announced from the doorway, her voice crisp and impersonal. Your father wishes to leave in 30 minutes. Lily stared at the ceiling, her small body weighed down by questions she couldn't fully articulate. Is Maggie coming back today? Patricia's lips thinned. No. I've already explained that Ms. Foster no longer works for this household. Now please hurry, we mustn't keep your father waiting. After a silent breakfast where her father hid behind his financial newspaper, Lily found herself being led to the family's sleek black Mercedes. Instead of her father's usual driver taking her to school, Maxwell had instructed James, his longtime chauffeur, to handle the school run himself. As the car pulled away from the mansion's circular driveway, Lily pressed her face against the window, clutching her folded drawing in her pocket. The gates of the estate closed behind them, and she felt a similar barrier coming down around her heart. James caught her gaze in the rearview mirror, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. At 62, he had served the Hartwell family since before Lily was born and had witnessed the subtle shifts in the household's dynamics over the years. You're quiet this morning, Miss Lily, he observed gently. Lily's lower lip trembled. James, why did Maggie leave without saying goodbye? Did I do something wrong? The question hung heavy in the car's interior. James adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, carefully considering his response. Unlike Patricia, who maintained professional distance at all costs, James had always seen his role as extending beyond mere transportation. No, Miss Lily, you didn't do anything wrong, he assured her, his voice warm with affection. Sometimes adults make mistakes, big ones. What kind of mistakes? Lily pressed, leaning forward in her seat. James sighed, his eyes meeting hers briefly in the mirror. Your father believes Miss Foster took something that didn't belong to her. Lily's eyes widened. Took something, like stealing. But Maggie wouldn't do that. She always tells me we must respect other people's things. I know, sweetheart, James said, his voice barely audible. Sometimes the people who teach us the most important lessons are the ones who need our understanding the most. But Lily wasn't satisfied. Her 7-year-old mind struggled to reconcile the Maggie she knew, who had taught her to always tell the truth, who had helped her return a toy to a classmate when she'd accidentally brought it home, with someone who would take things that weren't hers. If Maggie made a mistake, why can't she just say sorry? Daddy always tells me to apologize when I do something wrong, Lily reasoned. James's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. It's complicated, Miss Lily. Sometimes saying sorry isn't enough for grown-ups, and sometimes innocent people end up paying for things they didn't do. As they approached the exclusive Whitby school, where Greenwich's elite sent their children, Lily watched other students being dropped off, some by nannies who hugged them tightly before sending them off, others by mothers who fussed over backpacks and hair. The ordinary displays of affection she had taken for granted now seemed precious and fragile. James, Lily asked, her voice small as the car pulled to a stop. If Maggie can be sent away so fast, could I be sent away too? If Daddy gets mad at me? The question struck James like a physical blow. He turned in his seat to look directly at Lily, abandoning protocol. No, Miss Lily, never. You're his daughter, not an employee. That's completely different. But the uncertainty in James's eyes betrayed his words, and Lily, with the uncanny perceptiveness of children, caught it immediately. She nodded solemnly, not believing him, but appreciating the attempt at comfort. Have a good day at school, Miss Lily, James said gently. I'll be here to pick you up at 3 o'clock. The halls of Whitby School buzzed with privileged children, discussing weekend trips to the Hamptons and upcoming birthday parties at country clubs. Lily moved through the day like a ghost, participating in lessons with mechanical precision, but unable to engage with her usual enthusiasm. During art class, when they were asked to draw their families, Lily sat with her crayon suspended above the paper, unsure how to proceed. Who counted as family now? Would including Maggie be a lie since she was gone? Would excluding her be a bigger lie since she had been the most constant presence in Lily's life? At lunch, she sat with her usual group, daughters of hedge fund, managers and corporate lawyers, but their chatter about designer clothes and upcoming vacations seemed trivial compared to the hollow feeling in her chest. Lily, aren't you eating your cookies? They're chocolate chip your favorite, her friend Sophia noted, eyeing the untouched treats in Lily's lunchbox. I'm not hungry, Lily replied, staring at the cookies Maggie had baked just 2 days ago, carefully wrapped with a little heart, drawn on the napkin. The sight of Maggie's handwriting made her throat tighten. When James picked her up after school, Lily climbed into the car with none of her usual chatter about her day. She simply buckled her seatbelt and stared out the window as rain began to patter against the glass. Miss Lily, James began carefully, your father called. He'll be working late tonight. Patricia will serve you dinner. Lily nodded, unsurprised. Her father often worked late, especially when major deals were in progress. But tonight felt different, as if he were deliberately avoiding coming home to face the emptiness he had created. When they arrived home, the mansion seemed even larger and colder than before. Patricia greeted her with a clipboard in hand, already, checking items off a schedule. Homework until 5:30, then dinner at 6, bath at 7, bed by 8, she recited, not looking up from her list. Lily climbed the stairs to her room, passing by what had been Maggie's quarters. The door was ajar, and Lily couldn't resist peering inside. The room had already been stripped of personal touches, the colorful throw, pillows, the photographs, the stack of children's books Maggie kept for their reading time. It was as if Maggie had never existed. Dinner was a silent, solitary affair at the enormous dining table, designed for entertaining business associates rather than nurturing a child. Patricia served the meal efficiently, then disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Lily alone with her thoughts and the echo of her fork against fine china. At 8:45, the front door opened, and Maxwell Hartwell's footsteps sounded in the foyer. Lily, who had been lying awake in bed despite Patricia's strict bedtime, heard her father's voice conferring with James about the following day's schedule. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet, and made her way to the top of the stairs. Her father stood below, loosening his tie, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion, or perhaps something else. "Daddy?" Lily called softly. Maxwell looked up, surprised to see his daughter still awake. "Lily, you should be asleep." "I couldn't," she admitted, descending the stairs one step at a time. "I keep thinking about Maggie." A flash of something, annoyance, guilt, crossed Maxwell's features. "We'll find a new nanny soon. Patricia has already scheduled interviews." Lily reached the bottom of the stairs and looked up at her father. In her pink pajamas, her small figure seemed particularly vulnerable against the grandeur of their surroundings. "What does fired mean?" she asked suddenly. Maxwell blinked, taken aback by the direct question. "It means someone's employment has been terminated, that they no longer work for you." "But why did you fire Maggie?" Lily pressed, her innocent question cutting through. "Pretense." Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Lily, there are adult matters that you don't need to concern yourself with. Maggie broke an important rule, and there are consequences for such actions." "Was it because she stole something?" Lily asked, the word stole sounding strange and wrong in association with Maggie. Maxwell's silence was confirmation enough. Lily's small fingers curled into fists at her sides, her child's sense of justice flaring. "I promise I'll never steal anything, Daddy," she declared solemnly. "I'll never break any rules. I'll be perfect, so you won't fire me too." The words struck Maxwell with unexpected force. He knelt down, bringing himself to Lily's level, something he rarely did. "Lily, that's not... I could never fire you. You're my daughter." Lily reached out, placing her small hand atop his larger one. The gesture, so innocent and trusting despite everything, sent a wave of shame through Maxwell that he wasn't prepared to confront. "Promise?" she whispered. "I promise," he replied, the words feeling hollow even as he spoke them. That night, as Lily finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Maxwell stood in his study, a glass of scotch in hand, staring out at the manicured grounds of his estate. For the first time, he found himself questioning whether all his success, the wealth, the power, the respect of his peers, was worth the price he now recognized he was paying. The reflection in the window glass showed a man who had everything society valued, and yet somehow had managed to miss what truly mattered. The mansion settled into its nighttime silence, creaking occasionally, as if sighing under the weight of its occupants' unspoken emotions. Outside, rain continued to fall, tapping against windows like impatient fingers. It was well past midnight when Lily's eyes fluttered open. The glow of her unicorn nightlight cast soft shadows across her bedroom, but it wasn't enough to dispel the hollowness that had taken residence in her chest. She slipped out of bed, her feet finding the plush carpet. The enormous house felt different at night, less like a showcase of wealth and more like a mausoleum, preserving the remnants of what had once been a family. Clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest, Lily padded to her bedroom door and peered into the darkened hallway. The corridor stretched before her, lined with closed doors hiding rooms that were rarely used, except when her father hosted business associates. Lily had always been instructed to stay in her wing of the house during those evenings, Maggie keeping her company with board games and stories that made the isolation feel like a special adventure rather than an exclusion. But Maggie wasn't here anymore. Lily made her way down the hall, past her father's closed door where no light shone beneath. He was either asleep or still working in his study downstairs. She continued until she reached Maggie's former room, hesitating before turning the handle. The room was dark and felt strangely hollow, devoid of the warmth and personality that had made it Maggie's. But as Lily's eyes adjusted, she could see that not everything had been removed. On the dresser sat a forgotten bottle of Maggie's perfume, the light, flowery scent that Lily had come to associate with comfort and safety. Beside it lay a silk scarf Maggie often wore when they went for walks in the garden. Most precious of all, tucked in the back of a drawer that hadn't been completely emptied, Lily found a photograph. It showed her and Maggie at the Central Park Zoo, both laughing as they stood before the sea lion exhibit. Lily remembered that day with perfect clarity, how Maggie had lifted her onto her shoulders so she could see better, how they'd shared a giant pretzel, how Maggie had spent her own money to buy Lily a stuffed sea lion that now sat on her bookshelf. Cradling the photograph to her chest, Lily climbed onto the bare mattress and pulled Maggie's forgotten scarf around her shoulders. The faint scent of her nanny's perfume enveloped her, and for the first time since Maggie's departure, Lily allowed herself to cry. Not the controlled sniffles she had managed earlier, but deep, body-shaking sobs that released the confusion and hurt she'd been holding inside. "Why didn't you say goodbye?" she whispered to the smiling face in the photograph. "Did you stop loving me?" The unanswered questions hung in the empty room. Lily curled into a ball, burying her face in the scarf, allowing herself to be surrounded by this last tangible connection to the woman who had been the center of her world. She didn't hear the soft footsteps in the hallway or notice the door creaking wider as her father appeared in the doorway. Maxwell Hartwell stood frozen, taking in the sight of his daughter curled up on the stripped bed, clutching a photograph and wrapped in what he recognized as Maggie's scarf. It was a tableau of such raw grief that for a moment he couldn't speak. The controlled, pragmatic businessman who made billion-dollar decisions without hesitation found himself utterly lost in the face of his daughter's pain. "Lily?" he finally managed, his voice unusually gentle. Lily's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the hallway light. She didn't try to hide her crying or explain her presence in Maggie's room. Instead, she simply held up the photograph, a silent explanation that needed no words. Maxwell crossed the room slowly, lowering himself onto the edge of the bed with uncharacteristic uncertainty. He took the offered photograph, studying the two smiling faces, his daughter's uninhibited joy and the warm affection in Maggie's eyes as she looked down at Lily. "You miss her," he said. It wasn't a question. Lily nodded, hiccuping slightly as she tried to control her sobs. "She didn't even say goodbye, Daddy. She always says goodbye, even when she just goes to the grocery store." The simplicity of the observation cut through Maxwell's carefully constructed justifications. He had been telling himself that Lily would adapt quickly, that children were resilient, that a new nanny with proper qualifications would soon fill the gap. Looking at his daughter now, he realized how profoundly he had miscalculated. "I didn't give her a chance to say goodbye," he admitted, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. That was wrong of me." Lily stared at him with wide, glistening eyes. Her father never admitted to being wrong about anything. The concept was so foreign that she struggled to process it. Why, Daddy? Why did she have to go? Maxwell looked down at the photograph again, at the evidence of a relationship he had somehow failed to fully comprehend until now. How had he missed the depth of the bond between his daughter and her nanny? Had he been so consumed by spreadsheets and acquisitions that he'd become blind to the emotional landscape of his own home? "I thought she took something that didn't belong to her," he explained, choosing his words carefully. "When someone breaks trust that way, it's hard to keep them in your home." "But Maggie wouldn't steal," Lily insisted, her childish certainty unwavering. "She taught me that taking things that don't belong to you is wrong. She made me return Sophia's hair clip when I accidentally brought it home. She wouldn't do what she told me not to do." The simple logic of his daughter's defense created a hairline crack in Maxwell's certainty. He had acted on Patricia's report, on circumstantial evidence, on his own instinct that no one was above suspicion. But had he actually verified the accusation? Had he given Maggie, who had cared for his most precious possession with unwavering dedication for 3 years, the benefit of any doubt? "Sometimes," he began, then paused, unsure how to continue. How did one explain adult complexities to a child? How could he articulate his growing suspicion that his hasty judgment might have been influenced by something darker and more personal than concern over $50 missing? Lily filled the silence with a question that struck at the heart of her fears. "Daddy, are you going to fire me too, if I make a mistake?" The question hit Maxwell like a physical blow. He stared at his daughter, horrified by the implication. "Fire you? Lily, no, I could never. You're my daughter." "But Maggie was family too," Lily said with the devastating simplicity of childhood. "She was here every day. She knew which stories I like and how I like my sandwiches cut. She taught me how to tie my shoes and helped me when I was scared of thunderstorms. If you could make her leave forever because of one mistake, couldn't you make me leave too?" Maxwell felt something crack inside his chest, a wall of self-protection he had built years ago when his wife had walked out, leaving him with a 4-year-old daughter he barely knew how to talk to, let alone raise. He had hired Maggie out of necessity, focused on her qualifications and references rather than her warmth or empathy. He had told himself he was providing for Lily by ensuring she had the best of everything: schools, clothes, opportunities, while delegating the actual nurturing to a paid employee. And somewhere along the way, that employee had become more of a parent to his child than he had ever allowed himself to be. "No, Lily," he said, reaching out tentatively to brush a tear from her cheek. "I could never send you away, ever. You're the most important person in my life." Even as he spoke the words, Maxwell recognized their hollowness. If Lily truly were the most important person in his life, would he have spent so many evenings at the office? Would he have missed school performances for business meetings? Would he have failed to notice the profound attachment she had formed with her nanny? "Then why did you send Maggie away?" Lily pressed, unconsciously twisting the scarf between her small fingers. "She didn't do anything wrong. I know she didn't." Maxwell hesitated. The truth that he was no longer certain of Maggie's guilt, that he had perhaps acted hastily, that there might have been other factors influencing his decision, seemed too complicated to explain to a 7-year-old. And yet, the alternative was to continue a lie that was clearly causing his daughter immense pain. "I might have made a mistake," he admitted finally, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Maxwell Hartwell did not make mistakes, or at least, he never acknowledged them. Lily's eyes widened slightly at this unprecedented confession. "Then can you fix it? Can you bring Maggie back?" The hopeful note in her voice created another crack in Maxwell's carefully constructed defenses. "It's not that simple, sweetheart. When you hurt someone's feelings or question their integrity, you can't just pretend it never happened. But you always tell me that when I make a mistake, I should say sorry and try to make it right," Lily countered, using his own parenting. Platitudes against him with devastating effectiveness. Maxwell found himself at a loss for words. His daughter, in her innocent wisdom, had exposed the hypocrisy of his position. He was saved from having to respond by the sudden appearance of Patricia in the doorway, her hair in a neat nightcap and her robe tightly belted. "Mr. Hartwell, is everything all right? I heard voices," she said, her eyes taking in the scene with barely concealed disapproval. "Everything's fine, Patricia," Maxwell replied, his voice automatically shifting back to its usual authoritative tone. "Lily had a nightmare. I'm handling it." Patricia's lips thinned slightly, but she nodded. "Very well, sir. Shall I prepare some warm milk?" "That won't be necessary. You can go back to bed." After Patricia had departed, Maxwell turned back to his daughter, who was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. In that moment, she looked so much like her mother, the same penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed facade to the uncertainties beneath. "It's late," he said gently. "Let's get you back to bed." Lily clutched the photograph and scarf tighter. "Can I keep these?" Maxwell hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes, you can keep them." As he carried his daughter back to her room, her small body curled against his chest in a way it hadn't been since she was a toddler, Maxwell felt the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. For the first time, he was beginning to understand that his authority as CEO of Hartwell Investments didn't equip him for the much more complex role of being a father to a child whose heart he had carelessly broken. 5 days had passed since Maggie's abrupt dismissal. The Hartwell mansion maintained its impeccable appearance, crystal gleaming, floors polished to perfection, gardens manicured with mathematical precision. But beneath, the surface invisible fault lines were spreading. Maxwell sat in his home office, ostensibly reviewing quarterly projections, but his focus kept drifting to the small envelope on the corner of his desk. He had discovered it earlier that morning while searching for a misplaced contract, tucked inside his briefcase, where Patricia had apparently placed it without mentioning it to him. The envelope was addressed to Lily in a familiar, careful handwriting that he recognized immediately as Maggie's. The sight of it had stopped him cold, a complicated mix of emotions rising within him. He should give it to his daughter immediately. That would be the right thing to do. And yet, something held him back. What might Maggie have written? Would it undermine his authority? Would it make Lily's pain worse? Or, and this possibility disturbed him most, would it contain a truth he wasn't prepared to face? With a deliberation that felt more suited to a multi-million-dollar negotiation than a personal matter, Maxwell picked up the envelope and carefully opened it, telling himself it was his responsibility as a parent to screen his daughter's correspondence. Inside was a folded piece of stationery decorated with hand-drawn flowers around the borders. Maxwell unfolded it, a twinge of guilt at violating this private communication, quickly overwhelmed by his need to know what Maggie had written. "My dearest Lily," the letter began. "I'm so sorry I couldn't say goodbye properly. That makes my heart hurt more than anything else. I want you to know that I would never leave you by choice. These 3 years with you have been the most wonderful of my life. I've watched you grow from a shy little girl into the smart, kind, brave person you are today, and I am so proud of you. Your father believes I took something that didn't belong to me. I need you to know that I didn't, but sometimes grown-ups make mistakes in what they believe. I don't want you to be angry with your father. He loves you very much, even if he doesn't always know how to show it. Remember how we talked about forgiveness? How it doesn't mean what happened was okay, but that we choose to let go of anger so it doesn't hurt us inside. I'm trying to practice that now. I've left something special for you with Ms. Eleanor at the library. Next time you visit, ask her for the package with your name. Keep drawing, keep asking questions, and remember that you are loved, so very loved. All my heart, Maggie." Accompanying the letter was a small, colorful drawing of 2 stick figures, holding hands, one tall, one small, standing beneath a rainbow. Around the figures, Maggie had written words like brave and smart, kind and loved. Maxwell set the letter down, a heaviness settling in his chest. There was no recrimination here, no attempt to turn Lily against him, only concern for a child's well-being and a gentle assertion of innocence. He reached for his phone, briefly considering calling Maggie directly. What would he say? That he was beginning to doubt his hasty judgment. That he missed the stability she had brought to his home. That his daughter was suffering in her absence? Before he could decide, a knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Patricia entered, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Hartwell, I've scheduled interviews with 3 potential nannies for tomorrow afternoon. All come with excellent references from prominent families in the area." Maxwell nodded absently, his mind still on the letter. "That's fine. Patricia, thank you." Patricia hesitated, then added, "And Miss Lily's teacher called. She's concerned about Lily's participation in class. Apparently she's been withdrawn and distracted this week." This caught Maxwell's full attention. Did the teacher suggest anything specific? "She recommended a meeting next week to discuss strategies for helping Lily adjust to recent changes," Patricia replied, her careful phrasing not quite masking her disapproval of the situation. Maxwell studied his household manager, suddenly seeing her with new eyes. Patricia had been with the family for 5 years, predating Maggie's arrival. She had always maintained an appropriate professional distance from Lily, focusing on the household's operations rather than emotional nurturing. Had she resented Maggie's closer relationship with his daughter? With him? "Patricia," he began carefully, "the day we discovered money missing from my desk drawer, you were the one who reported it to me, correct?" Patricia straightened, her posture becoming even more rigid. "Yes, sir. As household manager, it's my responsibility to report any irregularities." "And you're certain the money was there the previous day? You saw it yourself?" A flicker of something, uncertainty, defensiveness, crossed Patricia's features. "I observed that your emergency cash supply was fully stocked during my weekly inventory check. The next day I noticed $50 was missing. And you're certain no one else entered my office during that time? Just Maggie?" Patricia's lips thinned. Ms. Foster was the only staff member who entered to dust and vacuum as per her Tuesday schedule. "I maintain a log of all staff movements, as you requested." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him, the pose he often adopted during difficult negotiations. "Did you actually see Maggie take the money, Patricia?" "No, sir," Patricia admitted, a flush rising to her cheeks. "But the circumstantial evidence was quite clear, and if I may say so, your swift action sent an appropriate message to the rest of the staff about your expectations." The rest of the staff, as if that had been his primary concern, maintaining discipline among his household employees rather than determining the truth. Maxwell felt a surge of self-disgust. "Thank you, Patricia. That will be all for now." After she left, Maxwell returned, his attention to Maggie's letter, focusing on one particular line. "I've left something special for you with Ms. Eleanor at the library." The Greenwich Library had been a regular Saturday outing for Maggie and Lily. Maxwell had encouraged these visits, seeing them as educational, but he had never participated. Now he wondered what Maggie might have left there, what final gift she had arranged for his daughter. His introspection was interrupted by the ringing of his cell phone. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was his executive assistant, reminding him of a board meeting he was already late for. With a sigh, Maxwell slipped Maggie's letter into his desk drawer, locking it with a small key. He would decide what to do about it later. Across town, in a modest apartment complex that felt worlds away from the manicured estates of Greenwich, Maggie Foster sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by job applications and want ads. 3 days of searching had yielded nothing promising. Her abrupt dismissal from the Hartwell household without a reference had raised red flags with potential employers, and the whispered rumor of theft had somehow already made its way through Greenwich's tight-knit community of domestic workers. She sipped lukewarm tea, trying to quiet the anxiety building in her chest. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and her savings would only stretch so far. But more painful than the financial strain was the ache of separation from Lily. For 3 years, her days had revolved around the child's routines, preferences, and developmental milestones. The sudden severance felt like a physical wound, Maggie's phone chimed with a message. She glanced at it, expecting another rejection from an employment agency, but instead saw a text from Eleanor, the children's librarian at Greenwich. Library. Lily was here today. Asked for you. Didn't have heart to give her your package yet. She seemed so sad. What happened? Maggie stared at the message, her throat tightening. She had left a special book for Lily at the library, a collection of bedtime stories they had read together, with a personal note inside. She had hoped it would provide some comfort, some continuation of their connection. But now she wondered if it would only make things harder for the child she loved so dearly. With trembling fingers, she typed a reply. Long story. Mr. H fired me, accused me of stealing. Couldn't say goodbye to Lily. Eleanor's response came quickly. That's terrible. You would never. Does Lily know why you left? Not sure what she's been told, Maggie replied. After a moment's hesitation, she added, How did she seem? The three dots appeared and disappeared several times before Eleanor's answer came through. Honestly? Heartbroken. Kept asking if I knew where you were. Said she made you a drawing but couldn't give it to you. Maggie set the phone down, tears blurring her vision. She had tried to be strong, to focus on practical matters like finding new employment and securing her financial future. But the thought of Lily suffering, confused by her sudden absence, broke through her carefully maintained composure. Had Maxwell Hartwell given any thought to what her dismissal would mean to his daughter? Had he considered the emotional impact on a child who had already experienced the abandonment of her mother? Or had the missing $50, money she had never touched, been more important than his daughter's sense of stability and trust? A knock at her apartment door startled her from her thoughts. Wiping her eyes quickly, she crossed the small living room, wondering if it might be her neighbor returning a borrowed cooking pan. Instead, she opened the door to find James, the Hartwell family chauffeur, standing in the hallway. His kind face was creased with concern, his cap held respectfully in his hands. Ms. Foster, he said gently, I hope you don't mind my stopping by. Got your address from the staff directory before recent events. Maggie stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. James, this is unexpected. Is everything all right? Is Lily okay? James entered, his tall frame making the small apartment seem even more modest. Miss Lily is physically fine, but he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She's not herself. Hasn't been since you left. Maggie sank onto her sofa, motioning for James to take the armchair across from her. What has she been told about why I left? Mr. Hartwell told her you had to leave suddenly. I believe she knows it has something to do with an accusation of theft, though I don't know how she learned that part. James paused, discomfort evident in his expression. Ms. Foster, Maggie, I don't believe for one moment that you took that money. Maggie's eyes filled with fresh tears. Thank you, James. That means a lot to me. There's something else, James continued, leaning forward slightly. Something I noticed but didn't think much of at the time. The day before the money went missing, I drove Mr. Hartwell and a business associate back from a lunch meeting. The associate, Mr. Davidson, I believe, repaid Mr. Hartwell for something. I heard him say, "Here's the $50 I owe you," for exiting the car. Maggie stared at him, processing the implications. So the money might never have been in the desk drawer at all. It's possible, James acknowledged. Mr. Hartwell might have put it in his wallet rather than his desk, but there's more to it, I think. He hesitated again, loyalty to his employer, warring with his sense of justice. I've worked for the Hartwells for many years. I was there when Mrs. Hartwell left. I saw how it affected Mr. Hartwell, and Lily, of course. He never talks about Lily's mother, Maggie said softly. In 3 years, he shut down any conversation that came close to the subject. James nodded. He was deeply hurt by her departure. But what I've observed recently, the way he watches you with Lily, I believe there may be more to your dismissal than a missing $50. Maggie's brow furrowed. What are you suggesting? I believe, James said carefully, that Mr. Hartwell may have acted out of fear rather than evidence. Fear of how close you and Lily have become. Fear, perhaps, of his own feelings. The suggestion hung in the air between them, neither comfortable enough to explore it further. Instead, Maggie asked the question that had been burning in her heart since she'd walked out of the Hartwell mansion 5 days ago. "How is she, James?" "Really?" The chauffeur's expression softened with compassion. "She misses you terribly. Carries that drawing she made for you everywhere. Asks questions no one seems able to answer." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "She asked me to give you this, if I ever saw you." With trembling hands, Maggie accepted the paper, carefully unfolding it to reveal a child's drawing. It showed 3 figures: a tall man in a suit, a small girl with yellow hair, and a woman with a pink skirt, all holding hands beneath a large house. Above them, in careful block letters, Lily had written, "My family." As Maggie traced the crayon lines with her fingertip, a tear fell onto the page. This was how Lily saw them. Not as employer and employee with child, but as a family unit. How had Maxwell failed to recognize what his daughter understood so intuitively? "Thank you for bringing this," she whispered, carefully refolding the drawing. "Please tell Lily." But what could she say that wouldn't make things harder? That wouldn't put James in an awkward position with his employer. "Just tell her I miss her too," she finally said, "and that nothing that happened was her fault." James nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he turned back, hesitating before adding, "Mr. Hartwell isn't a bad man, Miss Foster. He's just lost his way a bit. Has been for some time." With that cryptic observation, he departed, leaving Maggie alone with her thoughts and a child's drawing that spoke volumes about loss, love, and belonging. The following Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the elaborate stained glass windows of the Hartwell mansion's grand foyer. Lily sat on the bottom step of the sweeping staircase, dressed in her favorite blue jumper, the one Maggie had helped her pick out during their last shopping trip together. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a somewhat lopsided ponytail, her own attempt at the style Maggie had perfected. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, clipboard in hand as always. "Miss Lily, your father will be down shortly. I've prepared your breakfast in the small dining room." Lily didn't move. "Is today still library day?" Patricia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your father has interviews scheduled with potential new nannies this afternoon. I believe the library visit has been postponed." "But Saturday is always library day," Lily insisted, her small voice taking on an unusual edge of determination. "Maggie promised Miss Eleanor we'd return our books today." Before Patricia could respond, Maxwell appeared at the top of the stairs, adjusting his cufflinks, dressed for business even on a Saturday. "Good morning, Lily, Patricia." "Daddy, can we go to the library today, please?" Lily asked immediately, rising to her feet. "It's important." Maxwell hesitated, noting his daughter's unusual intensity. Normally, he would have delegated this request to Patricia or suggested an alternative activity more convenient to his schedule. But the events of the past week, his daughter's ongoing sadness, his own growing doubts about Maggie's dismissal, and the undelivered letter in his desk drawer had left him more attuned to Lily's needs than usual. "I suppose we could go for a short while," he conceded, surprising both Lily and Patricia. "I have those interviews at 2, but we could spare an hour this morning." Lily's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all week. "Really? You'll come too?" The wonder in her voice at this simple commitment made Maxwell uncomfortably aware of how rarely he participated in her regular activities. "Yes, I'll come too," he confirmed, trying to ignore Patricia's poorly concealed disapproval. The Greenwich Library was housed in a grand building that blended classic architecture with modern amenities. Maxwell realized as he pulled into the parking lot in his rarely driven Bentley that despite funding the library's new technology center last year, he had never actually brought Lily here himself. The children's section was a vibrant space, filled with colorful furniture, interactive displays, and on a Saturday morning dozens of children and parents engaged in various activities. Maxwell felt immediately out of place in his tailored weekend casual wear among parents in jeans and sneakers. Lily, however, navigated the space with confidence, heading straight for the librarian's desk, where a woman in her 50s with kind, Eyes and a colorful scarf looked up from her computer. "Lily," the woman exclaimed warmly, "I was hoping you'd come today." "Hi, Miss Eleanor," Lily replied. "This is my dad." Eleanor's expression flickered briefly. Surprise, perhaps, or something more complex before she extended her hand. "Mr. Hartwell, it's nice to finally meet you. Lily and Maggie are two of our most devoted patrons." Maxwell shook her hand, noting the slight emphasis on Maggie's name. "I've been meaning to visit for some time. My schedule hasn't allowed it until now." Eleanor's smile remained polite, but cooled slightly. "Of course. Busy man like yourself." She turned her attention back to Lily. "Did you finish that book about the girl who found the secret door?" Lily nodded, pulling a book from her small backpack. "It was really good. Maggie and I were halfway through when—" Her voice trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging painfully in the air. Eleanor's expression softened with understanding. "I have something for you, Lily. Maggie left it here last week." She reached beneath her desk and withdrew a wrapped package. "She asked me to give it to you the next time you visited." Maxwell felt a twinge of guilt, remembering the letter still hidden in his desk drawer. He watched as Lily accepted the package with trembling hands, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a book, a collection of bedtime stories with a bookmark protruding from its pages. "It's our favorite stories," Lily whispered, opening to the marked page where a note was tucked inside. Maxwell couldn't see what was written, but he observed the tears that welled in his daughter's eyes as she read it, not tears of distress, but of connection and remembrance. Whatever Maggie had written had provided some comfort to his child, something he had failed to do all week. "Dad," Lily said suddenly, looking up at him with an intensity that startled him, "can I go look at books now? By myself?" The request for independence was unusual. Typically, Lily wanted company and guidance in her activities. Maxwell glanced at Eleanor, who gave a subtle nod of reassurance. "All right," he agreed. "I'll be right over there if you need me." He gestured to a seating area where several parents were engrossed in magazines or their phones while their children explored the bookshelves. As Lily disappeared among the stacks, Eleanor fixed Maxwell with a direct gaze that few people dared level at him. "She's been very sad, you know, both times she's visited this week." Maxwell blinked, caught off guard. "Both times she's been here without— who brought her?" "Your driver, James, I believe. He said you had approved her regular visits to continue." Eleanor's tone made it clear she doubted this was the case. Maxwell made a mental note to speak with James about this unauthorized arrangement, though he couldn't summon any real anger. If anything, he felt grateful that someone had maintained this small piece of normalcy for Lily. "Mr. Hartwell," Eleanor continued, lowering her voice, "I don't typically involve myself in the private affairs of our patrons, but I've known Maggie Foster for 3 years. She's one of the most honest, dedicated caregivers I've ever encountered. Whatever happened between you—" "I appreciate your concern," Maxwell interrupted, his professional mask sliding automatically into place, "but this is a private family matter." Eleanor seemed unintimidated by his dismissal. "Of course. I just thought you should know that Maggie has been coming here every day this week, hoping to catch a glimpse of Lily from a distance. She doesn't approach her, doesn't interfere. She just wants to see that she's okay." The revelation struck Maxwell with unexpected force. Maggie had been fired without references, her reputation potentially damaged by the accusation of theft. She was likely struggling to find new employment, and yet her primary concern remained his daughter's well-being. Meanwhile, Lily had slipped away from the children's section, making her way to the library's main entrance with single-minded determination. She had memorized the bus stop location just outside, had observed it carefully during their weekly visits, listening as Maggie occasionally mentioned which bus would take them to her apartment if they ever missed their ride with James. The number 17 bus. Every 20 minutes on Saturdays. Clutching her library card and the $3 she had carefully saved from her weekly allowance, Lily exited the building, glancing back once to ensure her father was still engaged with Miss Eleanor. The green. Bus was already at the stop, its doors open as passengers boarded. Without hesitation, Lily climbed aboard, presenting her money to the surprised driver. "I need to go to Maple Street Apartments, please," she said, with as much adult confidence as she could muster. My mom is expecting me." The driver, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, looked doubtful. "You're traveling alone, honey. How old are you?" "I'm 7 3/4, Lily replied, adding the fraction for credibility. "I do this all the time. My dad just dropped me off." She gestured vaguely toward the parking lot where several cars were pulling away. Still looking skeptical, the driver accepted the fare. "Maple Street is the 4th stop. You sit right behind me, you hear? And you tell me when you see your mom." Lily nodded solemnly, taking the seat directly behind the driver as instructed. As the bus pulled away, she felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had never done anything like this before, had never directly disobeyed or deceived her father. But the need to see Maggie, to understand why she had left without saying goodbye, overrode all other considerations. The address wasn't difficult to remember: 203 Maple Street, apartment 4B. Maggie had mentioned it once when a package had been delivered to the Hartwell mansion by mistake. Lily had filed the information away, never imagining she would need it like this. Back at the library, Maxwell had been scanning the children's section for nearly 10 minutes, his concern growing with each passing moment. Lily was nowhere to be seen among the bookshelves or reading nooks. "Have you seen my daughter?" he asked a nearby parent, who shook her head apologetically. His pace quickening, Maxwell checked the restrooms, the study areas, and finally returned to Eleanor's desk with barely concealed panic. "I can't find Lily. She's disappeared." Eleanor immediately stood, her librarian's efficiency taking over. "I'll check the security feeds. We have cameras at all exits. When did you last see her?" "About 15 minutes ago. She said she wanted to look at books alone." While Eleanor accessed the security system on her computer, Maxwell called James, instructing him to drive to the library immediately. He then reluctantly informed Patricia, who was overseeing preparations for the nanny interviews. "Sir, shall I cancel the appointments?" Patricia asked, her voice tense even through the phone. "Yes, reschedule them," Maxwell replied, his attention divided as Eleanor motioned him over to her screen. "Mr. Hartwell, I found her," Eleanor said, pointing to grainy footage of Lily exiting the library's main entrance. This was 12 minutes ago. Maxwell watched in disbelief as his 7-year-old daughter walked purposefully to the bus stop and boarded a city bus, alone, without hesitation, as if she had planned this escape. "The number 17, Eleanor noted. "That goes toward the east side, stops at the community college, the shopping center, and several residential areas." A cold realization washed over Maxwell. "Maple Street," he said quietly. "That's where Maggie lives." Eleanor's expression confirmed his suspicion. "Yes, she has an apartment in the Maple Street complex." Maxwell was already moving toward the exit, phone pressed to his ear as he updated James on this new development. "Meet me out front immediately. Lily's taken the number 17 bus. We believe she's heading to Maggie Foster's apartment on Maple Street." The bus ride seemed both endless and too short, as Lily watched unfamiliar neighborhoods pass by her window. Greenwich transformed from the manicured estates of the ultra-wealthy to more modest residential areas with small businesses, apartment buildings, and public parks where ordinary families spent their Saturday mornings. When the driver called out Maple Street, Lily gathered her courage and stood, clutching her backpack and the book from Maggie tightly against her chest. "Your mom out there, honey?" the driver asked, peering through the windshield at the apartment complex across the street. Lily nodded, having spotted the familiar sign for the Maple Ridge Apartments. "Yes, thank you," she said politely, the manners Maggie had instilled in her asserting themselves even in this moment of deception. The driver watched carefully as Lily crossed at the crosswalk and approached the apartment building, only continuing the route once the child had safely entered the lobby. The building's security was minimal, a simple intercom system that Lily was too short to reach comfortably. She stood on tiptoes, scanning the directory until she found 4B M. Foster. With a trembling finger, she pressed the button. After a moment, Maggie's voice came through the speaker, distorted but unmistakable. "Hello?" Lily's voice caught in her throat. Now that the moment had arrived, she found herself suddenly uncertain, the rehearsed speech evaporating from her mind. "Hello? Is someone there?" Maggie's voice came again. "Maggie?" Lily finally managed, her voice small and wavering. "It's me. It's Lily." There was a sharp intake of breath from the other end, followed by a moment of stunned silence. Then the buzzer sounded, unlocking the lobby door. Lily pushed through, finding herself in a modest but clean hallway with stairs leading upward. She climbed to the 4th floor, her heart pounding with each step. When she reached the landing, slightly out of breath, she saw a door at the end of the hallway opening. Maggie stood there, frozen in shock, still wearing her weekend jeans and the simple blue sweater that Lily had always said matched her eyes. For a moment, neither moved. The woman who had been forced to leave without goodbye, and the child who had crossed the city alone to find her. Then Maggie was kneeling, arms outstretched, and Lily was running, closing the distance between them, in a desperate sprint that ended in an embrace so tight it seemed to repair something broken in both of them. "You're here," Maggie whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she held Lily close. "You're actually here. How did you... Does your father know where you are?" Lily shook her head against Maggie's shoulder, unwilling to release the hug just yet. "I took the bus. By myself. I remembered your address." Maggie pulled back slightly, her expression a mixture of pride, concern, and alarm. "Lily, honey, your father must be worried sick. We need to call him right away." "But I just got here," Lily protested, the words catching on a sob she hadn't realized was building. "I had to see you. I had to know why you left without saying goodbye. Dad said you took something, but I know you wouldn't do that. You taught me stealing is wrong." Maggie guided Lily into her small apartment, closing the door behind them. The space was modest but warm, with simple furniture and several framed photographs, including one of Lily that held pride of place on a side table. "Your father believes I took money from his office," Maggie explained gently, leading Lily to the sofa. "I didn't, but he made his decision before I could defend myself." "Then we have to tell him the truth," Lily insisted, with a child's unwavering faith in justice. "He'll believe you if we both tell him." Maggie smiled sadly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face and adjusting her crooked ponytail with the automatic care of long habit. "It's not that simple, sweetie. Your father, he's used to being in charge, to having his decisions respected. And I'm just was an employee." "No," Lily said firmly, pulling the drawing from her backpack, the one she'd been carrying all week. "Your family, see? I drew us together." Maggie accepted the drawing, her eyes filling with tears, as she studied the 3 figures holding hands. Before she could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Maggie and Lily exchanged a glance, both knowing exactly who stood on the other side of that door. "It's okay," Maggie said softly, giving Lily's hand a reassuring squeeze. "We knew this moment would come." Lily nodded but pressed herself closer to Maggie's side as the nanny rose to answer the door. When it swung open, Maxwell Hartwell stood in the hallway, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, his expression a complex mixture of relief, anger, and something else, something that looked almost like shame. James hovered a respectful distance behind him, his concerned gaze moving from Maxwell to the apartment interior where Lily sat clutching her drawing. "Lily," Maxwell breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank God you're safe." Lily didn't run to him as she might have just a week ago. Instead, she remained on the sofa, watching her father with wary eyes that reflected a new understanding of the fragility of relationships. "Mr. Hartwell," Maggie said formally, stepping aside, "please come in." Maxwell entered the apartment, his tall frame and expensive clothes looking out of place in the modest surroundings. His gaze swept the space, taking in the simple furnishings, the neatly organized bookshelves, the framed photographs that included several of Lily at various Ages. His eyes lingered on a particular photo, Lily and Maggie at the child's 7th birthday party, both laughing as they attempted to cut the cake together. "Lily," he said, turning to his daughter, "what you did was incredibly dangerous. Taking a bus across town alone? Anything could have happened to you." "I had to see Maggie," Lily replied, lifting her chin with a stubbornness that mirrored his own. "You wouldn't tell me why she left. You wouldn't let her say goodbye." Maxwell flinched, slightly at the accusation. "That was, I made a decision based on information I had at the time." "Wrong information," Lily said with the devastating directness of childhood. "Maggie wouldn't steal. She taught me better than that." An uncomfortable silence filled the apartment. James cleared his throat softly from the doorway. "Sir, shall I wait in the car?" Maxwell nodded distractedly, his attention fixed on his daughter and the woman who stood protectively near her. After James departed, closing the door behind him, Maxwell took a tentative step forward. "Lily, we need to go. Home now. We can discuss this there." "No," Lily said, the word so firm and unexpected that both adults stared at her in surprise. "Not until you say sorry to Maggie. Not until you fix it." Maxwell's jaw tightened reflexively. Apologies did not come easily to him, particularly not in front of his daughter, and especially not to an employee he had dismissed. "Lily, this is between Miss Foster and myself. Adult matters are complicated." "It's not complicated," Lily interrupted, her voice rising. "You were wrong. You hurt Maggie and you hurt me. You always tell me I have to say sorry when I'm wrong." Maxwell found himself at a loss for words, trapped by his own parenting platitudes. He looked to Maggie, perhaps expecting her to intervene, to exert the gentle authority she had always maintained with Lily. Instead, she remained silent, allowing his daughter the space to express her feelings, an approach he recognized as fundamentally different from his own. "May I sit down?" he finally asked, gesturing to an armchair across from the sofa. Maggie nodded, and he lowered himself onto the edge of the seat, looking strangely formal and uncomfortable in the casual setting. "Lily," he began again, his tone softening, "I understand you're upset. I know you miss Miss Foster, but the way you expressed that today was not acceptable. You frightened me terribly." "You frightened me too," Lily countered, her small fingers still entwined with Maggie's. "When you made Maggie leave without saying goodbye, when you wouldn't tell me why. I thought maybe I did something wrong. I thought maybe you could make me leave too." The naked vulnerability in his daughter's admission hit Maxwell like a physical blow. He had been so focused on maintaining authority, on demonstrating decisive leadership in his household, as he did in his business, that he had completely failed to consider how his actions might be interpreted by a child who had already experienced abandonment once in her young life. "Lily," he said, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady, "I would never ever send you away. No matter what happens, you are my daughter. Nothing can change that." "But Maggie was like my mother," Lily said, the simple truth landing with devastating impact. "And you sent her away over $50. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly, the weight of his daughter's perception settling over him. When he opened them again, he found himself looking not at Lily but at Maggie, whose expression reflected neither triumph nor resentment, only a deep concern for the child between them. "Ms. Foster, Maggie," he began, the words feeling strange and inadequate. "I believe I may have acted hastily regarding the missing money." Maggie's expression remained neutral. "Yes, Mr. Hartwell, you did. James mentioned something about a business associate repaying me," Maxwell continued, forcing himself to maintain eye contact despite his discomfort. "Mr. Davidson, $50 he owed me for a lunch. I had forgotten about that transaction." "So Maggie didn't steal anything?" Lily asked, looking up at her father with a mixture of vindication and lingering hurt. Maxwell hesitated, years of corporate training making it difficult to admit error so plainly. "It appears that way, yes." "Then why did you fire her?" Lily pressed, unwilling to let the matter drop with such a lukewarm acknowledgement. The question hung in the air, forcing Maxwell to confront motivations he had not allowed himself to examine until this moment. The missing money had been a convenient justification, but if he were truly honest with himself, there had been something else, something that had been building for months as he observed the deepening bond between his daughter and her nanny. "I think," he said slowly, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff, "I may have been jealous." Both Lily and Maggie stared at him, clearly taken aback by this unexpected honesty. "Jealous?" Lily repeated, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Of what?" Maxwell looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just his child, but a person with her own perceptions, feelings, and capacity for understanding. "Of the relationship you two have, of how easily Maggie connects with you, when I often feel like I'm speaking a different language, of the way you light up when she enters a room, while you've learned to expect disappointment from me." The words, once started, seemed to flow of their own accord, breaking through a dam of professional reserve and emotional distance he had maintained for years. "I've been so focused on providing for you materially, the best schools, opportunities, advantages, that I somehow convinced myself that was enough, that hiring the right people to care for you day to day was the same as being present myself." Lily listened with surprising stillness, absorbing her father's words with a seriousness beyond her years. Maggie remained silent, her hand still holding Lily's, but her eyes never leaving Maxwell's face. "When I saw the drawing you made," Maxwell continued, addressing Lily directly, "the one with Maggie in the pink skirt, I realized how central she had become to your world. And it frightened me, because I know how it feels when someone central to your world suddenly disappears." He didn't need to elaborate. Though Lily had been only 4 when her mother left, the absent presence of Catherine Hartwell hovered like a ghost in their lives, unacknowledged but always felt. "So you made Maggie disappear instead?" Lily asked, the simple question cutting through his careful explanation. Maxwell winced. "I reacted poorly. I made a decision that hurt you, hurt Maggie, based on fear rather than facts. And for that," he said, turning to look directly at Maggie, "I am truly sorry." The apology hung in the air, sincere but perhaps too late, too little. Maggie's expression softened slightly, but she made no move to offer absolution. "What happens now?" she asked instead, her arm instinctively tightening around Lily's shoulders. It was the question Maxwell had been avoiding since the moment he realized his error. The proper business solution would be a generous severance package, perhaps a glowing reference to smooth Maggie's transition to another position. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, he knew such a clinical resolution would only compound the damage he had already done. "I would like," he said carefully, "to ask you to consider returning to your position, with appropriate compensation, over this unfortunate misunderstanding." Maggie's expression remained guarded. "Just like that? Return to work as if nothing happened?" "No," Maxwell admitted, "not as if nothing happened. Things would need to be different." "What kind of different?" Lily asked, looking between the two adults with cautious hope. Maxwell took a deep breath. "For one thing, Ms. Foster would no longer be just an employee. She would be recognized as—" He hesitated, searching for the right term. "As part of our family, in a way. With appropriate boundaries, of course, but with the understanding that her relationship with you, Lily, is valuable and should be respected." "And would this arrangement include the understanding that I can't simply be dismissed without due process if something goes missing again?" Maggie asked, her gentle tone belying the firmness of her question. Maxwell nodded, accepting the implicit criticism. "Yes, it would include mutual respect and proper communication, something I failed to provide before." Maggie looked down at Lily, who was watching her with such naked hope that it made her heart ache. "I would need to think about it, Mr. Hartwell. This past week has been difficult. Trust once broken isn't easily rebuilt." "I understand," Maxwell said, and for perhaps the first time he truly did. He had spent his career building and breaking business relationships, always confident that with the right incentives, any partnership could be forged or dissolved at will. But family connections, the kind that Lily so clearly cherished with Maggie, operated by different rules. "Could you think about it at our house?" Lily asked, her voice small but determined. "Just to visit. You don't have to decide right away." Maggie smiled, gently tucking a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "That might be possible, if your father agrees." Maxwell nodded immediately. "Of course. James can drive us all back. You could stay for dinner, perhaps? We could discuss potential terms." The formality of his invitation, still framed in the language of negotiation, might have been comical if not for the genuine effort it represented. This was Maxwell Hartwell attempting to navigate unfamiliar emotional territory with the only tools he trusted: structure, agreements, defined expectations. Maggie recognized this, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased. "I'll come for dinner," she agreed, "for Lily's sake and to talk." The relief that washed over Lily's face was immediate and luminous. She threw her arms around Maggie's neck, then, after a moment's hesitation, ran to her father and embraced him as well, the first spontaneous affection she had offered him in days. As Maggie gathered a few belongings for the evening, Maxwell found himself standing awkwardly in her small living room, surrounded by evidence of a life he had never bothered to imagine. Books on child development shared shelf space with novels and gardening guides. A half-finished craft project sat on a small table, something with yarn and beads that he recognized as similar to a bracelet Lily had proudly shown him months ago. "She made that for you," Maggie said quietly, noticing his gaze. "For Father's Day, we were working on it together." Maxwell swallowed hard, reaching out to touch the colorful creation with uncharacteristic gentleness. "I had no idea." "There's a lot you don't know about your daughter, Mr. Hartwell," Maggie said, her voice kind but firm. "She's an extraordinary child, sensitive, thoughtful, remarkably perceptive, and deeply afraid of disappointing you." The observation landed, like a verdict. Maxwell nodded, unable to formulate a defense or denial. "I'd like to change that," he said finally. "With your help, perhaps." It wasn't quite a job offer, nor was it merely a personal request. It existed in some undefined territory between employment and family, a new kind of relationship that would require all three of them to navigate unfamiliar boundaries. As they prepared to leave the apartment, Lily slipped her hand into Maggie's, with the easy confidence of long-established trust. With her other hand, after a moment's hesitation, she reached for her father's. The three of them stood there briefly, connected in a way that echoed the simple drawing Lily had created, a child's vision of what family could be, if only the adults in her life were brave enough to try. 3 weeks later, the Hartwell mansion hummed with unfamiliar energy. The grand dining room, typically reserved for business associates and formal occasions, had been transformed by small but significant changes: colorful placemats instead of the formal linen tablecloth, fresh wildflowers in a ceramic vase that Lily had painted herself, and 3 place settings arranged in a more intimate configuration at one end of the massive table. In the kitchen, Lily stood on a step stool beside Maggie, carefully stirring a bowl of pancake batter, while Maxwell awkwardly attempted to operate the coffee machine, a task normally handled by the household staff, who had been given Sunday mornings off as part of the new household arrangement. "Not like that, Daddy," Lily giggled, watching her father's confusion. "Maggie showed me how to do it. You have to put the pod in first, then close it and press the blue button." Maxwell raised an eyebrow at his daughter, feigning offense. "Are you suggesting that a man who manages billions in investments can't figure out a coffee machine?" "Pretty much," Lily confirmed with a mischievous smile that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Maggie bit back a laugh, catching Maxwell's eye over Lily's head. The ease between them was still developing, a tentative truce that had slowly evolved into something approaching mutual respect. Maggie had returned to the Hartwell household, but on significantly different terms. She was no longer just the nanny, but had been officially designated as Lily's primary caregiver, with expanded responsibilities and authority regarding the child's upbringing. More importantly, the emotional boundaries had shifted. Maxwell had begun to participate in activities he had previously delegated entirely to Maggie. Sunday breakfast had become a family tradition, as had Thursday evening board games and Saturday morning library visits. Patricia, initially resistant to the changed dynamic, had gradually adjusted her approach, though she maintained a professional distance that contrasted with Maggie's warmer presence. "I think the batter's ready," Maggie announced, inspecting Lily's work. "Want to try pouring it yourself this time?" Lily nodded eagerly, accepting the responsibility with careful concentration. Maxwell watched the interaction, still somewhat amazed by the natural rhythm between them, the way Maggie intuitively knew when to guide and when to step back, how she cultivated Lily's independence while ensuring her safety. It was a delicate balance he was still learning, his corporate leadership skills proving largely irrelevant in the realm of parenting. But he was trying, showing up, participating, making mistakes and acknowledging them, in ways that had begun to rebuild his daughter's trust. After breakfast, they moved to the garden, taking advantage of the perfect early summer weather. The formal landscaping that had once dominated the grounds was now interrupted by a small vegetable patch where Lily and Maggie had planted tomatoes, carrots, and herbs, a project that had initially horrified Patricia, but which Maxwell had defended as educational. "Look, Dad, the tomato plants have tiny green tomatoes now," Lily exclaimed, pulling him by the hand to examine the small fruits forming on the vines they had staked together the previous weekend. "Impressive," Maxwell acknowledged, genuinely surprised by how the plants had thrived. "You've done an excellent job taking care of them. Maggie says growing things teaches patience," Lily informed him solemnly. "You can't rush a tomato." Maxwell glanced at Maggie, who was kneeling nearby, weeding around the herb section. "Wise words that might benefit many of my colleagues on Wall Street," he observed with a wry smile. Maggie returned the smile, the wariness that had characterized their early interactions gradually giving way to a cautious warmth. The financial world could learn a lot from gardening. Growth takes time, and you can't control all the variables. As Lily skipped ahead to inspect her carrot tops, Maxwell moved closer to Maggie, lowering his voice. "The school called yesterday. They've noticed significant improvement in Lily's participation and general mood. They specifically mentioned how much more enthusiastic she seems." Maggie nodded, unsurprised. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure, when their world makes sense and the people they depend on are reliable." The gentle emphasis on reliable wasn't lost on Maxwell. It had been the core of their most difficult conversation when negotiating Maggie's return, her insistence that Lily needed consistency above all else, that emotional security couldn't be established if relationships remained contingent and precarious. "I've been thinking about what you said," Maxwell began, watching Lily as she carefully watered her plants, "about formalizing your position in Lily's life, legally speaking." Maggie looked up, her expression cautious but hopeful. "And? I've spoken with my attorneys. They're drawing up paperwork that would establish you as Lily's legal guardian in the event that anything should happen to me. Not that I'm planning on going anywhere," he added quickly. "But after everything that's happened, I want to ensure that Lily's security isn't dependent on employment contracts or my whims." Maggie was silent for a moment, absorbing the significance of this offer. "That's a substantial commitment, Maxwell." The use of his first name, still new and slightly uncomfortable for both of them, acknowledged the shift in their relationship. No longer merely employer and employee, they had become something more complex. Co-parents of a sort bound by their shared love for a child who needed them both. "It's the right thing to do," Maxwell said simply, "for Lily, and it's long overdue." Before Maggie could respond, Lily called them over, eager to show off a butterfly that had landed on one of her marigold flowers. The adult conversation paused as they both moved to share in her excitement. The serious discussion temporarily set aside, but not forgotten. Later that afternoon, as dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a summer storm, the three of them settled in the mansion's library, a room that had once been merely decorative but had recently become a family gathering place. Maxwell sat in one of the leather armchairs, reading financial reports with half his attention, while keeping an ear tuned to Lily and Maggie's conversation as they sorted through books on the floor nearby. "I think we should read this one tonight," Lily was saying, holding up a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden. "It's like our vegetable patch, but bigger and more magical." "Excellent choice," Maggie agreed. "It's one of my favorites. Did you know I read it when I was just a little older than you?" As they chatted, Maxwell found his attention drifting from his reports to the scene before him. There was something in their interaction, a natural, unforced affection, that stirred complicated emotions in him. Not jealousy, as before, but a wistful recognition of what he had missed in his daughter's early years, when he had been too consumed by work and his own emotional walls to truly know her. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. James, who had taken on additional household duties since Patricia's weekend hours had been reduced, appeared in the library doorway. "Mr. Hartwell, there's a Miss Rivera here to see Miss Foster. She says they had arranged to meet." Maxwell looked to Maggie, who nodded. "Elena Rivera, we worked together at my previous position. She's between jobs and wanted my advice about a potential nanny placement. I hope you don't mind that I invited her here. We had planned to talk over coffee, but with the storm coming—" "Of course not," Maxwell said, making an effort to suppress his instinctive preference for privacy. Part of their new arrangement included acknowledging that the mansion was now Maggie's workplace, and home too, with reasonable accommodations for her personal life. "James, please show Miss Rivera to the kitchen. We'll join her there." As Maggie rose to greet her friend, Lily looked up from her book with sudden concern. "You're not leaving, are you? To go be someone else's nanny?" The question revealed the lingering insecurity that still surfaced occasionally, despite the progress they had made. Maggie knelt beside Lily, her response gentle but firm. "No, sweetheart. I'm just helping my friend find a position. My place is here with you. Promise?" Lily pressed, her small hand clutching Maggie's. "I promise," Maggie assured her, then glanced at Maxwell. "We all do. Remember our agreement?" Lily nodded, visibly relaxing. The forever family promise. No more sending people away without talking first. The forever family promise had been Lily's term for the formal conversation the three of them had shared when Maggie returned, a child's understanding of the complex adult commitments that had been made to ensure her emotional security. Maggie left to meet her friend, Lily abandoned her books and climbed onto the arm of Maxwell's chair, leaning against his shoulder in a casual display of affection that still caught him by surprise. "Dad?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. "Why did you get jealous before when you sent Maggie away?" Maxwell set his reports aside, giving his daughter his full attention, a conscious choice he now made regularly. "That's a complicated question, Lily." "Maggie says that's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain something," Lily observed shrewdly. Maxwell couldn't help but smile. "She's not wrong, but in this case it really is complicated, even for me to understand." He paused, considering how to express concepts that he himself was still processing. "I think I was afraid." "Afraid of what? You're not afraid of anything. You're the boss of everything." "I was afraid of not being the most important person in your life," Maxwell admitted, the truth simpler when spoken aloud than it had been in the tangled corridors of his mind. "I was afraid that you loved Maggie more than me." Lily considered, this with serious concentration. "But that's silly. You're my dad. Maggie's my—" She hesitated, searching for the right classification. "My Maggie. It's different kinds of love." The wisdom in her simple explanation humbled him. "You're right, it was silly, and rather than talking about my feelings, I made a bad decision that hurt you and Maggie." "But you fixed it," Lily pointed out, patting his hand with the generosity of forgiveness that children often extend before adults feel they deserve it. "And now we're a real family. The three of us." Maxwell pulled her into a proper hug, still marveling at how much more natural such gestures had become in recent weeks. "Yes, we are, a real family." The words settled over him with surprising rightness. Their arrangement was unconventional, certainly, not the traditional family unit he had once envisioned when he married Lily's mother, but in its own way it was more authentic than the emotionally distant household he had maintained, before Maggie's departure and return. From the kitchen, they could hear Maggie's voice mingling with her visitors, the easy conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. The sound of genuine connection and warmth spreading through rooms that had once been characterized by formal silence. "Dad?" Lily asked, playing with the button on his casual weekend shirt. "Are you still sad about Mommy leaving?" The question caught him off guard. They rarely spoke of Catherine, whose occasional birthday cards and holiday